Now let's turn to something that broke John, your heart, Tom, your heart. I'm indifferent. I'm not a Yankees fan. I don't know about you, Bob, but John, I know you are a diehard Yankees fan. Same, Tom, with you guys. Any thoughts on how the season ended?
You want to go first here, John?
Yeah, there's silence right there on that
Yeah, I
question.
mean, look, baseball is a huge part of my family and with the kids, and was a huge part of my childhood with my extended family. Um, and so it's something that we pay very close attention to, and certainly during this time of the year is a big area of focus for us. And by the way, that's a beautiful thing. I was texting Joe Girardi's going to come on here in a moment, and I was texting with him about. I went to the two home games or the last two home games this week, and it was a game four. Judge hit the home run and tied the game. We were down 6-1, elimination game, and they come back and or it was game three, and they win that game. And it was the full cycle human experience as an adult sports fan. I'm sure we've all experienced the thing. When I was 15 years old, I mean, I watched every single game and lived and died reading the box scores in the newspaper every day. Um, and as you get to be an adult, you often ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? I think it was Jerry Seinfeld did the whole bit about you're really just rooting for laundry because you hate Wade Boggs one day, and then the next day you love Wade Boggs because he's wearing a different shirt. Um, and as an adult, and you process that, you're like, yeah, what the hell am I doing? Why am I rooting for these guys? The Yankees don't care about me. Why do I care so much about them? And I had that full experience at Game Three. We're season ticket holders. Season tickets are not cheap. As a family, we invest a lot of time and energy into the Yankees. And they take you through this long 162 game season. And then you get into the Blue Jays. We're down 2-0, elimination game. We're down 6-1 in the third or fourth inning. It looks like the thing's about to be over. People around us are talking about leaving. Um, and in my mind, now I'm there with my son, so I'm trying to put on a happy face because I know that he loves the game and loves the team. Um, but I'm thinking to myself, gee, what the hell am I doing? Like, it's such a waste of my money. It's a waste of my time. I should just take my son fishing. This is ridiculous. Um, but then you go through this thing. They have this ferocious comeback. Judge hits the home run. And the subplot of the series, of course, had been that Aaron Judge, who's obviously a Hall of Famer and one of the best players of our lifetime for sure, has struggled terribly in the playoffs. It had clearly been a mental thing for him. It was clearly pressing in the playoffs for the last few years. And for him to hit that home run was just an um, uh, enormous positive moment for the fans. And I turned to my son at that moment, and he's old, he's 15, so he's old enough to understand all of that. And I turned to my son, and he had tears in his eyes. And for a 15-year-old kid, he's crying because Aaron Judge hit a home run, and that was the answer, the full circle. That's why we spend so much time with this, right? It's for those moments. It's not at this point of my life. I don't, I shouldn't say I don't care whether the Yankees win, but I told people in my office the next day that moment with my son, I said I didn't care if they won or lost anymore. That was worth the price of admission for the season, and that is why we as adults spend the time and energy that we do on pro sports. I think. What are your thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, he was crying, but it wasn't tears of joy.
No, I go the other way. While I was really happy about the Judge thing, and I really, really was, they may as well finish in dead last place. The Yankees, awful season, horrendous, terrible, and everything is garbage. It's pure garbage. That's where this team is. That is it. The New York Yankees have gotten to a point where you should finish in dead last place. How are you getting beat by the likes of Toronto in these situations? And it's the same thing. It's funny. John used an analogy. I used this analogy on my Fox Sports show. And I said, being a Yankee fan is like I'm with my 1-year-old, where you look at him and you go, I love you so much. You're so adorable. Oh, look at that. He did something so great and it's so amazing. And then the next thing, he's swimming in the dog bowl. You're like, why would you do that? What are you doing? I can't do this. Screaming and crying and keeping you up all night. And you're like, oh, this is terrible. but you still love them. I'm still loving the Yankees. I'm going to bash them. I'm going to rip them. I'm going to have problems with managing. I'm going to have problems with all of the things that they do, and I'm still going to love them forever because they are the New York Yankees. And it's funny, John said, you root for the laundry. You do, and you get personally attached to these people. You get, you feel for Aaron Judge, a guy that's making more money than I'll ever see in my life, right? I'm struggling to make ends meet. This guy's, out there, bathing in $1,000 bottles of Dom Perignon. He doesn't care about me, but I feel for him. I wanted that moment for him. I love the Yankees, but I'm at a point where enough is enough. We are the New York Yankees. Number 2 is the first loser, as George used to say, right? You were the first loser. Enough of this okay attitude, of this, well, we made it to the playoffs and everything's going to be okay. No. Be the killer. Go out there. Do everything it takes and stop at nothing to get a W. And Hal hasn't been able to do that. This incarnation has not been able to do that. And the New York Yankees may as well finish dead last if this is going to be your playoff exit every year.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I mean, it's just on a pure baseball level, it's fascinating to see the teams that are advancing now, right? You look at the Blue Jays, you look at the lineup of the Blue Jays, and how many times does a guy come up and you're like, who the hell is this guy? I've never even heard of this guy. But this guy Ernie Clement killed us in the Blue Jays series. Never even heard of this guy before, and the guy's like 10 for 13 in the series. And and this goes to roster construction, all the things that have been talked about for the last week in New York sports, all of us around the dinner table and with our friends and in sports media, the roster construction, some of the decisions that have been made, the culture of the team, and we'll talk to Joe about these things. But we deserve to lose to the Blue Jays because, and here's Joe right now.
And there he is.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We got you perfectly.
You came on at the right time because we were just getting into the Yankees, and I'm sure you've heard all the the frustration from the Yankees fans, and you're in a unique position to be able to shed some light on it. Let's just start. What are your thoughts on the season and how things went in the playoffs?
Well, I think for the season, with all the injuries they had to their pitching staff early on in the rotation, I think there was a lot of questions on what was going to happen and who was going to pitch. And I think there were some real pleasant surprises with Cam Schlittler and Will Warren in the job they did. And I think that's really important moving forward. And whenever you can develop starting pitchers within your organization, it could save you a lot of money and really go out and get the pieces that you need. So I think from that standpoint, it was a really good season. I think they made really good moves at the end at the trade deadline that really balanced their roster a lot better. And that's why you saw them take off and they played a lot better. And I know the schedule wasn't really tough at times, but you look at the stretch when they played what was considered the 4 playoff teams. They had a 12-game stretch and they went 7-5. So that was really good. I just think for whatever reason, Toronto was a bad matchup for them this year. And I think sometimes the shorter the series, it's advantaged the team that doesn't have as much starting pitching. And I think that was Toronto. Like, had this been a 7-game series, I think the Yankees probably would have fared better. I can't say that for sure, and I don't want to take anything against Toronto because they're a really good team. But I think Toronto's rotation is susceptible to a long series, and they lost yesterday, and that's really difficult. You're relying on a rookie, and then who starts for him in Game 3?
Yeah, let me ask you. So the thing we were just talking about is just roster construction, because the thing I found myself doing during the Blue Jays series repeatedly is that some guy would come up and I say, who the heck is this guy? I've never even heard of this guy, but every dude is a tough at bat. Every guy is a tough at bat. And the Yankees, when I look at the roster, I wonder to myself, yeah, on a 162-game season where more than half the games are going to be against bad teams with bad pitching and we're going to hit a ton of home runs, do we have the tough at bat? But then I have looked at the free agents that are coming up this winter and I say, how do you even identify those guys? Is that a culture thing, the tough at bats, or is that the player is a guy? You look at an Ernie Clement, as a guy we were just talking about before he hopped on. It's like, never even heard of that guy before, and we couldn't get that dude out.
Well, I think it's a philosophy that they teach throughout the minor leagues. And when they get there, they're prepared to grind out at bats and put tough at bats on people. And I think the Yankees have shifted more towards the home run hitting teams. Because if you looked, I think it was like in the last 5 or 6 years, teams that had out homered the other team in the playoffs went like 95-20.
Right.
But what they don't include in that stat is, okay, but how many opportunities did they have with runners in scoring position, and what did they do? They just pull one single piece. And I think you can get caught up in that. And a lot of times, the top 2 or 3 pitchers don't give up a lot of home runs, and it becomes more difficult. And you think about in the playoffs, teams usually add pitchers at the trade deadline that make their bullpen stronger, like a Louis Varland. I mean, they add guys like that, and it just becomes more difficult to me. And Toronto has done this the whole year. They've worn teams out. They've grinded out at bats. And those were the teams that we had in the 90s.
Right.
I felt like that was the team that I had in 2009. But it's just shifted a little bit. And sometimes it's just the players you have. And I think a lot of times it's a copycat league. I think teams will start preaching more like we need to be better at putting the ball in play. And I think we're starting to see that some. And there was a streak, John, from like 2018 to 2022. The teams that struck out the least and struck out the most were the most successful teams. And now it's changed a little bit. That's not necessarily the case, but so everyone tried to copycat that. And now teams make adjustments, and Toronto has figured out a way to adjust and win their way.
Joe, you mentioned that it's a copycat league, and sometimes to the negative of a copycat league. We saw that a lot of the critics jumped on Aaron Boone for taking Max Fried out after 7 1/3. But then we watched Tarek Skubal get taken out after 99 pitches. Now, it didn't hurt Detroit overall, but you start to get into that position where the fans are sitting at home screaming, why are you taking this guy out just because that 100-pitch plateau? As a manager that has been in that spot, do you have that number that you won't let them get past? Do you have somebody come from above telling you, hey, don't let him go past this? Or is it strictly just a gut feeling that everybody's like, look, 100 pitches and that's that?
For me, it was about 115. And you tried to limit that a lot of times. You didn't want him going 115 all the time. But sometimes, because of day off in the playoffs, you're pretty well rested. I look at Tarek Skubal. Tarek Skubal had a hard, 95 pitches. It wasn't like 8 innings, right? And I think you have to look at the stress pitches and the amount of pitches they're throwing per inning. Did they have a really long first inning where they threw 37 pitches, and that wears the guy out a lot? But I think too many times we just say, okay, that's the number, or I'm not letting him go through the lineup the third time. Some of the greatest advice I ever got from Don Zimmer was watch the swings. The swings will tell you when a pitcher's done. So if he breezes through the lineup the first time, the second time you're starting to see a lot more foul balls, extended at bats, you know that he's getting close to the end. But the other thing, though, that I think sometimes we lose in this is when you start using pitchers 4 or 5 times in a 7-game series, guess what? They're no surprise to the other team either. So if my starter's rolling like Kevin Gausman, I'm leaving in. And what surprised me was, if you look at Polanco, the last 3 years, he's hit left-handers much better than right-handers, and he flipped him around to the right side. So it kind of shocked me, the move, and it ended up hurting them. It ended up, scoring another run, which happened to be the winning run, and put them up 2-1. So I think you have to be sometimes careful how many times a team sees your reliever as well, because they become used to that. And the second time I see a reliever, I'm much more comfortable than the first time, and the third time I'm really comfortable. And I think teams sometimes make that mistake.
Joe, let me ask you. So Aaron Boone's come under a lot of criticism for last week. I know you're friends with all these guys, so I'm not going to put you in a tough spot. But part of the debate I've been having with friends of mine is, what is the role of the manager? And you think about it in 3 buckets. You have lineup creation, in-game moves, and then culture. Are kind of the 3 ways that you can impact the team as a manager. And I'd love to just get your thoughts on those things. And if we go in reverse order, from a culture standpoint, I mean, so much has changed since you were a player to today, where, social media, these guys are now, there's more of a me thing going on with the fancy cleats and the gloves and, now the Yankees have beards and the bat flips and all this stuff that just wasn't around in the 80s. As a manager, how much, if you found yourself in a clubhouse with some more flamboyant guys, how much control of the culture does the manager have, or do you lean more on your star players? I mean, I've been friends with some guys who run basketball teams, and I've been told by guys, look, the culture of the team is defined by the superstars, and there's not much I can do. Tom and I both coach Little League. If a kid shows up to Little League practice with his Bruce Bolts and bat flips, which these kids often do, you can bench the kid and control that stuff pretty well. It's hard to bench a guy making $25 million a year. So how much control does the manager have?
Yeah, that's interesting because that guy that's making $25 million a year is probably helping the manager win games.
Yeah.
And you're based on wins and losses. I mean, that's the bottom line. But I think you can put your finger on the culture easily. And I think the best run clubhouse is a clubhouse that's run by the players. Mm-hmm. They understand what your vision is, and they carry it out. And as far as players being flamboyant and some of the bat flips, as long as it's not detrimental to the team, I don't have a problem. Be yourself. We go back to the days that we played, and David Wells, he was a little out there. and there were some things that he did, you were like, whoa, but it didn't hurt the team. He was prepared to pitch on his days. He did his job, and that's the most important thing, because I always said if you had a clubhouse of 26 guys like me, it'd be a really, really boring clubhouse, right? It would be all work, no play, no fun, and that sort of thing. So I think you have to allow the players to be themselves, but you want the players to understand the vision. And if you care about them, they will care about your vision. Have them run the clubhouse. And I think the Yankees do a pretty good job of that. I think Aaron Judge kind of sets the tone of that clubhouse. And I think guys pretty much follow his tone. And there's some players that are a little flamboyant, but I don't have a problem with that. Like even for Jazz Chisholm, right? When his home runs, I'm curious to what he's going to do. I want to see what he does this time, right? And so I'm okay with that.
Now, in an instance, we could look at the Yankees. There's been a lot of scrutiny this year, maybe last year, on some of the bonehead plays, which, as a fan, I probably feel it more painfully than the average casual observer. But if you go back to your time as a player, or even when you managed the Yankees, you get a guy makes a bonehead play, big mental error, costs you in a spot. Who sits down that guy? Is it the Jeters sit him down and straighten him out, or do you call a team meeting as the manager? How does that usually get addressed? Is it more the manager or the players?
Well, a lot of times it will be the position coach or the pitching coach if it's a bonehead play, and you'll have them talk. Sometimes it will be the manager. You'll talk to the players, and I think it's always important you ask what they were thinking, so they take accountability for their actions, and maybe their thought wasn't a bad thought process. They just got out executed by the other side. But and a lot of times it will be a veteran guy that'll go put his arm around a young guy and say, hey, look, this is how we do it, or I made that mistake before. Just don't let it happen again. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that it can be covered. But when players support players, it means a lot. And as long as the player understands that his coaches and his managers have his back, and a lot of times people don't understand that publicly we won't criticize a player, but we'll get on them behind closed doors, because who likes to publicly be humiliated? Nobody. So you just don't do it, and you just try to pick the right time to do it where it doesn't affect him in a negative way, where he doesn't hang his head. He goes out and produces, but he learns from his mistake.
And what about, so let's go to lineup creation. How much of that these days, obviously in the post Moneyball era, how much of the lineup is being set by guys above the manager, if at all? Is that how much control does the manager have?
I'm going to say some clubs probably have more influence than others, and I think it really comes down to the manager being comfortable with what he comes up with, and maybe what people up above him come up with, and maybe using a combination of both. I know for me, I would ask, when I had Schwarber and Harper in Philadelphia, ideally you'd like to put two right-handers in between them. And how do you do that? Harper wanted to hit third, so it becomes very difficult because Schwarber, you wanted to get a lot of at bats. So I had him do like 4 different lineups. And the difference in the 4 different lineups was like somewhere between 1 and 2 runs the whole year. And the only thing that I think of with lineup construction is make it harder for the manager to deploy his relievers that he wants. And that's the most important thing. And I also think when you put a lineup together, you're trying to beat the starter. You're not saying, okay, I'm going to try to beat the 8th inning guy and the 9th inning guy, and that's how I'm going to put my lineup. I'm trying to beat the starter. So I think that you're looking for ideas. I know there were times I would ask because I would be frustrated with the way our lineup was producing. And sometimes that's just the slump that you're going through. And I would ask, do we shake it up? And there were times, the media would ask me, and I'm like, okay, why don't you put someone else hitting first? I said, who would you like? Well, I don't know. Well, so then why am I going to move the guy if we don't really have an answer? You have to have answers for the questions, and sometimes you just don't.
My question to you is, how much has it changed since then? Because for the fans that get angry and the media that also gets angry, the word analytics has almost become a dirty word. Back then, if I said that to Joe Girardi back then, I think you're going to have a completely different answer than you did when you were a manager. And then maybe now, has it evolved to a point where analytics is kind of ruining baseball?
Well, I look at it this way. We used to make decisions on the probability of something happening. We did it back then too. We just didn't have as much available as we do today, right? We had matchups. We had pitches that hitters hit. We had counts that they hit them. We had what they did with runners in scoring position. Were they more aggressive? Were they less aggressive? We had all that, but there's just a lot more that players, to me, can learn their own abilities better than we could. So when I think of analytics, I don't think about it so much in managing a game as much as it's a process to improve the players, to increase their spin rate, to increase their velocity, to increase maybe the time it takes them to get the bat from where they're holding it to the contact point. It's more of those things, trying to get the ball in the air. Because I had a hitting coach back in the early 2000s. His name was Jeff Pentland. And he used to say, back leg goes down, ball goes up. Now, he didn't say that hit home runs, but he knew that when you got the ball in the air, there was a chance of more damage. So it's not like it hasn't been around. It's just evolved more, and it's just more tools you can use to try to improve players and to manage a game. I mean, I was called Binder Joe when I took over in 2008, if you remember, and they thought I was way too analytical. And now they probably say I'm not analytical enough, but I would disagree with them.
Joe, if I can put you on the spot for 1 second. Game 1 against the Red Sox, you sitting Jazz and Ben Rice, or are you playing the lefty-righty?
That's a hard question. I went out to get the righties, and Wells had more success. I think, Ben Rice is a really good player, and I think he's going to continue to improve. But the one thing that I always wanted during the playoffs was my best defensive catcher, the catcher that understood the most. Because in close games, you can't make little mistakes. And I think that when it comes to these tight games, I want defenders in there because you can't make mistakes.
Right. So, Joe, before we let you go, if you're running the Yankees right now, as you pointed out, I mean the core is pretty good, and we have some good young guys.
Yes.
If we think Cole can come back next year healthy, which hopefully he will, I mean that's about it. And you put Schlittler now in the 4 spot, that's about as good a rotation as there is in baseball. We hold on to some of these relievers. The bullpen, at least on paper, looks very solid, and you go around the position players. And there's not too many holes with the exception of we have McMahon and and I'm curious your thoughts on Volpe. What tweaks would you be looking to make in the offseason?
I think adding a left-handed reliever that has a big breaking ball would be something that I would go after to combat some of these left-handers and make it more difficult for the opposing manager, knowing that, he's got that guy down there. I got to be careful where I put my lefties, because the Yankees had one lefty, and so you don't worry about stacking your lineup with lefties. That's a problem to me. Number two, I think they're going to have to address some outfield problems because Bellinger's a free agent, Grisham's a free agent, and they're going to have to either try to re-sign, Bellinger, or I think Jason Dominguez is probably going to get a chance to play every day, and I think
Kyle
that's
Tucker.
probably a good thing. Kyle Tucker, yeah, but Bellinger's a lot less expensive as a free agent, and you can probably do some other things. And I think they're going to have to address, what they do possibly, with like Volpe. It seemed that when he got the shot for 2 weeks, he was pretty good.
Yeah.
Offensively. So does he have to have shoulder surgery to repair that labrum? Is he going to be out for a while? And I would like to see possibly a right-handed hitting catcher so Wells doesn't have to face all the tough left-handers because that's what he had to do this year. And that makes it tough on him. But I don't necessarily think there's a ton to do. I think they do have a pretty good core. Just some little pieces they need to sprinkle in. And I think an outfielder is really, really big. And I think one more good platoon bat that can either play the outfield or the infield, a right-handed hitter, is really important.
All right, and Joe, last thing before you go, what are your thoughts from here? We got 4 teams left. Are you still doing Fox? Or are you done broadcasting?
No, I'm done. I have the Dodgers in Seattle playing.
Yeah.
In the playoffs, and I'm going to go with the Dodgers because of their experience. And I love Milwaukee's like Toronto, and I love Milwaukee's team, but I think we've seen the Dodgers shore up their bullpen by using some of their starters that didn't pitch a whole lot. The emergence of Sasaki down there, I just like their experience and what they're able to do. And I like Seattle's pitching over Toronto, and I think in the end, the injuries that Toronto's had is going to hurt them.
And I will say, just last thought is I was talking to these guys before you hopped on about my experience at Game 3 and my son crying. You and I talked about this the other day when Judge hit the home run, and that's just a beautiful part of the game. My head tells me Dodgers, but I don't know if you guys caught the when Seattle knocked out Detroit the other day, there was an image of a fan, an adult man, in the stands in Seattle weeping uncontrollably. And it's just a beautiful thing for a good baseball town that's never even been there before. I hope they get there.
My mom was the youngest of 15, and she grew up on a farm. And they basically designed their day around when they can listen to the game on the radio in the tractor, or come home and watch it at night. And I never looked at it that way, but I started to understand it because you think about it. We look forward every day to the ball game and what's going to happen. And it's so important to people's lives. And that's what I love about my dad gave me the experiences that you're giving your sons and their baseball team. Now, the Cubs did not go to the playoffs. So I didn't get to do that. But I at least got to go to the ballpark and eat Ron Santo pizza, see my favorite player, Ron Santo and Jose Cardinal. And I'll never forget those days with my father.
Yeah, that's special. That's special. And look, and I've told my son, I grew up in pre-free agency Yankee fandom, which in retrospect was a real blessing because in the 80s, the Yankees were not good, and that made '96. I remember my whole family weeping when you guys won in '96, and our kids growing up as Yankee fans, and you look in. Even being in the stadium the other night, with the fans booing, and you can feel the fans now have been taught that we are supposed to win, and in part because Jeter and all of you guys, set that expectation. Hey, anything short of a World Series is a failure, which of course you can appreciate as a player. It's not great for the fans to adopt that mentality. You look at a year like this and. Look, we got knocked out in the second round of the playoffs. Like in most markets, that would be considered a success. And when you look at what's happening in Milwaukee and Seattle this year, just the joy in those families and what that means to them, that's a special thing. I love that about baseball.
And even Toronto to that. I mean, it is special. And I think I think a lot of people were predicting doom and gloom when Garrett Cole went down in spring training. And look at all the excitement the Yankees, gave the fans. And believe me, I was part of that mentality. If we didn't win, it was considered a failure, and that's hard. But that edge the fans give you is really an advantage for Yankee players because they keep you on your toes. There's an expectation every day. They provide you energy every day. Every time you go on the road, there's a ton of Yankee fans. You're blessed and fortunate to be a Yankee because you're always followed, and they give you energy.
All right, so we're going to keep Tom being super critical of the Yankees just to keep everyone on their toes then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before you came on, I said you either finish it dead last or you win it all. There's no in between. That's it. I'm the dangerous fan that John talks about.
Yeah, but tell me, Tom, were there a lot of days that you were really happy this year?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, what if you would have won 41 games?
Yeah, 100%.
You can be miserable.
I think it's the Yankee mentality, which is a good thing. I like other sports teams that will never win, but it's the Yankee mentality. We're the Yankees. We're supposed to win. And like John said, it's because you guys put that in me. I didn't do it. I grew up in the Mattingly years, right? It's you guys that put that in me, which is a good thing.
The Yankees always had the highest payroll.
Yeah.
That is not the case anymore. They're either third or fourth, and it's different. I mean, some of these other teams have exploded in payroll, and the highest payroll doesn't guarantee you win, but it usually gets you to the playoffs and gives you a pretty darn good chance. And you can overcome injuries where if you're in a small market, you can't.
Unless you're the Mets.
Yeah.
All right, well, Joe, hey, thanks so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate you.
What a great way to end the show. For John Taylor, Robert Charnock, Tom Barton, and the Yankee great, Joe Girardi. Thanks for joining us.